All right, welcome back to Staff Development Nurse, and I am Nurse Courtney. I give you tips, tools, tricks, and resources on helping you be successful in skilled nursing and long-term care. If you are new to this channel, welcome, and if you are returning, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about five reasons why your retention rates may be low within your building. So when it comes to staffing, the first thing you need to look at is whether your issue is a recruitment issue or a retention issue. Recruitment focuses more on getting people through the initial steps, the application phase, getting people to actually apply to the building, getting them to actually come in for the interviews, recruiting them in. Once you have the person in, the next phase we're looking at is retention, and that is longevity. How long are people staying in the building and working before they leave and they transition out? This video is focusing primarily on the retention phase of this process. So I want to talk to you about five reasons why your retention rate may be low. It's things that I have seen from a consultant side a lot, especially throughout this crazy pandemic that we've all been dealing with, but it is what is causing a lot of our staff to run literally out the door. So I want to talk about these things. If there's some practices that you're doing in-house, think about how you can alter them and change them. So number one is no orientation. So typically when you bring a new hire on, you have the conversation with them about how many days they're going to orient on the unit. Each state requirement is a little bit different when it comes to the number of hours a person has to have orientation. But what has happened a lot throughout this course of the pandemic, and still happening today in a lot of facilities, is that new hires are promised a specific amount of time of orientation, but it's not fulfilled once they enter on the unit. And this is causing a lot of new hires to leave altogether. They're not getting the number of days they're promised. A lot of these new hires are newly experienced CNAs or nurses that need a little bit more support and guidance, and they just don't feel comfortable with working in the building, being on a unit or a floor that they have not received sufficient training for. So you need to figure out a workflow, a process, a system in-house that you can combat this challenge and make sure that people are getting the orientation that they're supposed to get. So let's talk about some ways we can solve this issue of the no orientation piece. Well, there's a couple things you can do, and of course, the specifics would depend on your building itself, but think about some of these things. Could this person come in and orient on a different shift that has a lot more staff? For example, is your 7 to 3 shift heavier staff? Could they do their first week of orientation on 7 to 3 and then switch off to 3 to 11 or 11 to 7? Could you take a seasoned CNA in-house, give them training on how to orient new hires, and pay them extra money to work on a different shift? So for example, here's my stellar 7 to 3 CNA. I'm going to offer her or him, a bonus to switch their schedule to a 3 to 11 or 11 to 7 shift. They're going to be my primary lead trainer on that specific unit. And as we're bringing new staff members in, they'll actually orient and train them. Okay, so those are just two things that you can look at when it comes to making sure that your staff gets the orientation, but you got to put a process in place, because if this is a practice that is going on in your building, it's probably one of the number one reasons why you can't keep staff. And then it just continues in this vicious cycle with no end in sight. All right, the next is heavy workloads and assignments. So traditionally, when we look at nursing, our brain is trained to look at ratios and looking at PPDs, right? Looking at, with the per patient hours and all that stuff. But we really need to take a deeper dive into developing our staffing ratios. And that needs to look at the acuity of a residence on the unit. And so what I found is, let's say it's a unit, there's 4 CNAs, and they're all going to have 12 residents apiece. Oftentimes what I find is that the acuity of each assignment varies immensely to assignments that are extremely light as we call it, right? A lot of people who are more independent, maybe one person assist or standby assist, can do a lot on their own, can feed themselves, don't generally ring a lot unless they actually need something, to like the opposite end of the spectrum. Here's the assignment or section with 12 residents, all of which, 10 out of 12 are totally dependent, require Hoyer lifts, need to be fed, need to be turned and repositioned because, they can't even do any of those things themselves routinely. And you have a staff member who is literally running nonstop, missing lunches, missing 15-minute breaks, and slowly getting burned out every single day. So what I would like you to do is look at what your CNA assignments are, really dive deep and see what the acuity levels are with the residents, and try to divvy those assignments up a little bit more evenly, where a heavy workload isn't just put on one or two staff members, but more evenly spread amongst the staff on the unit themselves. And the great way of doing this, again, is talk to your frontline CNAs on the units to see what it's like. And better yet, shadow the CNAs, shadow them in their section so you can see firsthand what their typical workload or caseload is like when they come in the building and they work in that section or area. And you can start unit by unit and filter your way through. But if one person is consistently looking at each different section and assignment and doing a shadow, you will clearly be able to see the differences in the work level between the multiple assignments. Okay, so that is one way that you can solve that challenge. All right, the other is the lack of teamwork. It's already hard enough with everything we've been through the past couple years with the pandemic, but being a new employee in a new building and not having staff members who are willing to help you can be very challenging. And let's face it, a lot of times when our new employees come in, they typically get stuck with one of the worst assignments, right? You have other CNAs who have seniority, and a CNA section opens up, they want to switch to a different section, and typically it is that heaviest section that is open. And that's the section with all the Hoyer lifts, the dependent cares, the behaviors. If that new CNA coming in does not have support, they don't feel like they can go to people and ask for help, then they're not going to stay. They're not going to stay. You're going to lose them. So a couple ways to address this is circling back to my last tip, which really taking a deep dive and looking at the assignments to try to prevent it being too heavy on one person, but also starting to do some team-based team building activities with the staff members on that unit. Team-based activities are a great way of getting your staff members to connect on a deeper or more personal level, making it more comfortable for staff members to come to each other and ask for help, and just reducing the tension overall on the unit. So team-based activities is a great way to combat that lack of teamwork on the floor. All right, the next one is low staff morale. And I talked about this in another video that I did, but low staff morale is huge when it comes to recruitment and retention. Just like I discussed in that video, let's face it, 90% or more of the time that your new hires come in is spent with direct frontline staff. If your direct frontline staff is not happy, they feel burned out, they feel overworked, they feel unappreciated, it is going to reflect in the training your new staff member gets. So you need to focus on boosting staff morale. If you have not watched that video, make sure you watch that boosting staff morale video, because I give you a couple tips on how you can actually do that in-house. And last but not least, is just burnout from working very long hours. Things you can do definitely from a management side is really keep an eye on the overtime and the number of hours that staff is working, and seeing if you can give rest days or rest breaks in between multiple double shifts or multiple 12-hour shifts, so that person can have a chance to regroup and refresh, right? If you have staff members that are working 8 or 9 16-hour shifts straight, you better believe they're going to burn out at some point in time. You better believe that the care is being provided is not necessarily going to be the best care possible, and there's going to be things missed and errors and mistakes that definitely can be made because people just get tired. They get tired. So make sure you can give a couple rest breaks or rest days in between some of those double shifts itself. The other thing I want you to think about when we talk about burnout is just everything with the pandemic itself. The pandemic has caused us to alter our personal lives, not just at work, but at home, how we connect with other people, issues with school one day and then being on Zoom another day, like all these other issues that have come into place, and losing family members and loved ones and residents, right? It's been a whirlwind, like all around us. So a lot of this from the burnout can come from a mental health aspect as well. So things you can try to do to address this is maybe offer support groups for your frontline staff members in the building and management too, where you can come together, talk about a lot of the changes and challenges that you've experienced, and kind of get your feelings out to express it. A lot of times, companies in your local area, like if you work with hospices, home health agencies, home care agencies, a lot of those agencies too will offer like Zoom trainings or face to face trainings with different buildings through their social workers or even clergy, depending on what your staff members, religious background is, on helping them to get more support. And if you already contract in house with a psychology group or a social worker or a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, right? If you're already contracting in house with some of these mental health professionals, see how you could possibly extend services to your frontline staff members, right? Zooms, again, support groups, or just hosting quarterly trainings, meetings, just to give them a sounding board and an outlet to let out some of these challenges that we are facing, but we just keep bottled in because we go on autopilot. Okay, so these are five reasons why you may not be able to retain staff in your building. But we also talked about some ways that you can circumvent, that you can go around those issues and start to make positive changes in your building. All right. So hopefully you got some value out of this building. You can visit me at staffdevelopmentnurse.com. And we have a private Facebook group as well that's all geared towards nurse leaders and skilled nursing and long-term care, helping you be successful, giving you tips, tricks, tools, and resources. So thank you so much for tuning in and watching, and I'll see you in the next video.